Okay everyone, we're back at the greenhouse. It's me again, Mark. Welcome back to the channel, Kalei Plants. And today, we have another video. And I know some of you might be thinking, oh, Kalei Plants is taking too long to upload. But actually, I've been very busy. Recently, I've been doing some volunteering work online. And yeah, my time has been spent on something else. But I really want to continue making videos for you guys so that you have something to watch, something to listen to while you are gardening. And for this one, I thought that it would be nice if we would go onto a trip on other places where they grow succulents, and specifically places where succulents grow naturally in the wild. So I think that I wanted to feature some of these videos that I found on YouTube so that you can have an idea on how succulents are or what they look like if they're in the wild. I have a few videos downloaded here on my iPad, and I'm recording it so that you can see what I will be reacting to, and I will be showing the video on this one. But you can also go straight to the videos. I will be putting the links on the description so you can find them and you can watch them on your own. The first ones that we're gonna watch are succulents from a channel that I don't think is active anymore. This one I think came from people who are actually scouting these succulents in the wild, and they're recording these small clips of succulents. These plants are growing in the wild. It's not planted in the location, so let's just check out the video.
Donc voilà, nous venons de trouver de nombreux conophytum
in the rocks, in between rocks.
Cubicum.
Conophytum cubicum, yes. Looks like a squarish type of lithops.
Il y a moins de 10 ans par le Tchèque Petr Pavelka.
And yeah, look at this part of the video. You can see that the skin around the plant, that's actually its old leaves that had dried off. So these stone plants, they shed their old leaves and they grow from inside of their older leaves. So these older leaves will dry out, and you can see here it's beautiful. And I think the ones that are popping up in between, I think those are flower buds or seed pods. Yes, really nice.
Donc voilà, ils sont légèrement carrés et des petits fruits.
Oh yes, and that is their location. Okay, you can see here it's in the mountains. It's very rocky. There's not a lot of other plants growing around, and the plants that we saw, the conophytum, they're in between rocks, so they're actually very shaded. They're not in full blazing hot sun all day long, so they're actually partially hidden within those rocks. And you can see here that the landscape is really bare, really wild. There's no other plants. There's not a lot of trees around. Okay, now let's go to the next one. This is Haworthia truncata. You can see they're right in between the rocks. Okay, let me just play it back, but much more slowly. Okay, let's set the playback speed to 0.75. So we have some time. Okay, you can see that?
Yeah, partout.
Yes, they're in the middle of the rocks, and there are some grasses around. Yes, they're really tucked into the rocks. Really nice. Okay. So they're partially hidden. Oh, these are much more exposed. And you can see here around them. Okay, you can see that on this side of the screen there are ice plants. So yeah, those are ice plants that have gotten leggy, and you can see that the stems are bare and the leaves are on top. So much like with this ice plant right here. So that's what they are most probably like. So the stems will naturally be bare on the wild, and there only will be leaves on the top of the stems. I think it's really nice, really fun.
On trouve ici aussi de grosses gasteria.
Okay, there's a gasteria right there. Okay, you can see that. The leaves are kind of like they're bit off. Okay, so I have a plant like that right here. So really nice seeing them on the wild. Okay, that plant. Okay, it looks like that. Okay, so the leaves are bit off. I believe some other animals eat this plant, I think. Yeah, really nice. Ice plants, I think. And there's the Haworthia, tucked right in between the rocks and the sand. And you can see that only the top layer of the leaves are visible, the windows, and most of the plant is actually underground. So it's protected from the scorching heat of the sun. And I believe those windows, they will shrink a little bit if it gets too dry. so that the plant will not be exposed to the heat, and if it gets water, it will be plumped back up again so that it can absorb more light. So it can absorb a lot of light if it has water underneath it, but if it's very dry, it will protect itself inside the rocks. Really, really amazing adaptation. I have here the truncata. I believe this is in Africa, I think. So you can see there. So only the top layer of these leaves will be visible in the wild. And most probably not every leaf will be visible. Some leaves will actually be hidden still at the bottom. But if it's exposed at the top layer, it can still photosynthesize, and the upper, lower part of the plant will be protected from the sun. Okay, so those nuts will not be burned in the wild. Okay, now let's go. Next, we have our guide right here. They sound like they're French, but this is Africa, I believe. See that? There. Tucked in between the rocks. Okay. See that? You can see the plants are scattered on the places where you can just walk right past them and you will not be able to notice them unless you look very closely and unless you know what you're looking for. Yes, they're kind of like camouflaging themselves in the wild. So now let's go to the next one. This is Haworthia bayeri. There's our guide again. So I think these guys, the ones that are taking videos, I think they came from another country and then they went to South Africa probably to see these plants in the wild. And I think they're already avid fans of these plants. I'm just hoping that they're not collecting these plants because succulents in the wild are actually very hard to find. And because of their adaptations, they're actually very easy to transfer, to transplant, but it's not actually very nice to remove these plants from the wild. It's actually illegal. That's called poaching, collecting plants from the wild. Even seeds, you are not supposed to collect seeds from the wild because you're supposed to let the plants grow there. It's their natural place where they can grow, and they help with the environment, with other animals and with the other insects, pollinators that live in the area. So if you remove those plants, you will be disrupting the ecological balances or whatever it's called. So you will be damaging the nature on that place. So I would really recommend that if you're living in a place where there are wild succulents, don't collect them from the wild. I believe some people will already be selling them if you're in that location. So you can just buy from actual sellers and not collect these plants on your own. Okay, let's continue the video. Okay, you can see in this one, there are patches of grass all over, okay, and the Haworthia bayeri, okay, so it's there.
Ah, il y a une petite là. Là, regarde.
Probably says that it's a small one.
Là.
Oh yes, there it is. So it's actually tucked in at the side of a grass type plant. So it's actually tucked inside the grass. I believe that's one other way these Haworthias grow. If there are screens, protection, or other bushes or grasses around them, they will be protected from the sun.
Une grosse ici.
Okay, there. Looks like a little shiny star, jelly star plant. Kind of blends in with the rock as well.
Ouais, donc elles se cachent bien. Elles sont bien sous le buisson. Ici.
Really nice. And there's a flower stalk on that one. Really nice.
Là.
This one. There's one hidden. There's a pup right there.
Et peut-être
Really nice.
là-dessous. Si jamais. Ah,
Yes.
il y en a une ici.
Under the dead dry grass. They're growing right there.
À côté d'un bout de verre.
And they look like they're thriving.
Là.
Even with that much shade. Really nice. And there's an aloe flower stalk right here. Okay.
Les aloés,
An aloe striata probably.
aloés, je sais pas.
Really nice.
Je sais pas.
And you can see around them there are some other plants growing. So it's possible that they can grow along with other plants as well.
Ah,
With
ici
non-succulents.
encore.
There. Yep. They're just all over the ground in those areas. Also, I would just like to mention that these plants that we're seeing here in the wild, they're not very large succulents. They're actually very compact. If you find them in the wild, they don't grow into these humongous sizes. They're really just small, tiny plants that can clump up. They can produce offsets here and there, but you don't find them in the wild as these very big specimens. So if you actually are able to buy really big succulents, then it's actually a very nice thing to have because succulents really grow slowly even if they're in the wild. Okay, so now we're gonna go to this other explorer. So it came from a channel that is named Neil Curry, and it's a documentary of survival of the fattest. And here they actually travel to South Africa, I believe, where they find a lot of these succulents, including aloes and stone plants. So let's just check it. You can see that the landscape just hills and hills.
All good nature films nowadays are supposed to start with a drone shot. Well, here's ours.
Drone shots, nice.
Once upon a time, 3 intrepid explorers went off into the desert to talk Latin to the plants.
France, in this area where we're walking now,
Talk Latin,
will there be any antimima here?
I'm pretty sure. There's supposed to be 3 species here.
It's a really nice place.
These guys are succulent enthusiasts and are here in South Africa's Namaqualand to look at some of the astonishing plants that manage to survive in the heat and extreme dryness of this semi-desert.
Well, that's one of the main areas for
They have their cameras with them.
Here's an antimima fenestrata.
They have
The nice
kneecaps.
pink flowers.
The photographer has kneecaps. Oh, look at that. Probably
Can
an
you make a
ice cream.
close-up of it, George?
Yeah, you know, it's
To show the new leaves coming through the old.
coming
Yes.
through, the little pink
So what is a
Ice plants.
succulent? Probably the simplest definition is that it's a plant that has developed at least one of its parts as a storage tissue for
Crasula.
usable water, to help see it
Ice
through
plants.
times when water is scarce.
Really nice.
Succulents occur mainly in Central and South America
A rock
and in
plant.
parts of Africa.
Oh yes, look at that. They form into clumps.
They're found mostly in arid areas, deserts or semi-deserts,
Really
and have
thick.
adapted to surviving in the kind of harsh conditions, heat, cold, dryness and wind,
Crasula,
where
look
most
at
other
that.
plants are unable
Like a
to
flower
live.
vase.
They're fascinating plants, and to many of us anyway, also beautiful. They range in size from so-called stone plants, the size of a pebble, to aloes the size of a small tree.
Look at that.
Between them, they have devised an amazing number of different
Conophytum,
strategies to
probably.
survive typical desert
Crassula.
conditions.
Crasula are from Africa.
Water, or rather the lack of it, is usually the primary challenge for their survival because all plants need it so that photosynthesis, the
That's
basic
so
mechanism
fun.
of their biology, can carry on functioning.
This one
So
grew
plant
big.
survival in desert conditions is mostly about collecting, storing and conserving water whenever the opportunity arises. The variety of ways they do this is amazing.
Really nice. Look at all those flowers.
Botanists
This is a
generally
different type of
classify
succulent,
succulents as
probably.
leaf, stem or root succulents. But these distinctions are not always clear because many plants use a combination
Oh,
of these methods to
Haworthia.
meet their needs. It's one of the things that makes them interesting.
Aloe, brevifolia probably. This is euphorbia.
Succulents, or vet planter as they're popularly known in South Africa,
Wow.
it means fat plants in Afrikaans, are in many ways the ultimate survivors.
Aloes. Dead leaves at the bottom, healthy leaves at the
And with
top.
apologies to Charles Darwin, he got it almost right.
Wow. Looks like a font used in Jurassic Park or something. Okay, So let's just
So-
skip this. I think they're talking here. And then they travel a little bit. And yes, here we go.
Seed pod.
Whichever way you look, it's not for sissies.
Sorry,
Seed pod.
this is seed
Whichever
pod.
way you look at it, plants stuck in a fixed position, especially in a desert, have a lot to contend with. Being a succulent is definitely not for sissies. They have had to become masters at harvesting, storing and conserving water.
Okay,
Many
that's a
have
jade
developed a
plant.
kind of leaves on which even the tiniest amount of moisture, dew or fog for instance, will be caught and can be collected.
Yes.
Others, to further improve their chances of capturing water, have grown hairs or developed spines or bristles.
That's a really nice type of sedum probably.
It seems to work as a technique, and the cells of the leaves have developed the ability to suck in any water almost immediately before it
Yes.
evaporates.
I've said this before, and
But as with
I
many
used to
things
say
in
that
life, being in the right
succulents
place
don't
at
absorb
the right
water through the leaves, but right now I'm actually starting to believe that more and more. Succulents can absorb moisture from their leaves. It's not just I think the most efficient way to water them if you're caring for them at your home. So it might not be very efficient to water them through misting. Watering them through roots will give them more water, but in the wild they can also survive with the moisture that comes from the air. Okay, and I believe here in South Africa, you can see the explorers that were in the video. They were dressed in these long sleeve coats or long sleeve t-shirts and coats, and they don't look very hot. So I think that the place is a desert, but it's not a very particularly hot desert. I think it's a desert with kind of a milder temperature than the Sahara, because South Africa is actually very down low on the map of Africa. So I believe in those places they can also have these colder temperatures, so they're not really close to the center of the earth, so it's not very hot in that part of Africa.
time is also useful. Any succulent lucky enough to land in a spot where the dew or mist condenses on nearby
Look at
stones and runs down into the soil where they are rooted will have a far better chance of surviving
And their soil
than a
looks
plant
like
that ends
it's
up
very
in the open.
sandy, very dry soil. Oh, look
But
at
sometimes even they are blessed and find cracks in the underlying soil where moisture has collected. These hidden cracks end up being plotted on the landscape like a map as the plants follow them.
that. Wow.
The moisture they find is often sufficient to keep them going when everything else around them is bone dry.
Yes. Oh, look at that, a cotyledon.
In other areas, succulents manage to get a foothold, or rather
Crassula?
a roothold I suppose,
Or
in
Adromiscus, I
fissures and
believe.
cracks that stay damp long after the surrounding rock has
Look at
dried
that.
off.
In between rocks.
These adaptations are all experiments in survival.
Wow.
Some work, others don't.
Hello.
What may be good for helping a
Crassula.
plant to absorb water may not be so useful at protecting it from the heat. What makes it attractive to pollinators may also make it look interesting to predators. In the end, it's all a matter of compromise, and this is what botanists and evolutionists find fascinating, and why many of them come to witness this living laboratory in all its variety.
That can afford to have that.
Yes, really nice. So they really have a lot of adaptations which help them stay alive in these really harsh conditions. Some of them can even grow on these rocks, so where they can have like really small root systems, and the leaves will be, I think the moisture that they have will be contained in their leaves. So with these small root systems, they can stay stuck on a certain place with a few soil on it, and then the moisture will be collected on their leaves, and that will be the way that they will be surviving even if they don't have a lot of roots or a lot of potting mix on them. Okay, so let's just skip forward because this will be very long if you watched all of this. Okay, you can see there's a lot of different plants here.
Some of the most intriguing leaf succulents are the so-called window plants.
Window plants, Haworthia.
They've gone so far as to actually put their leaves underground
Yes,
out
that's a
of
different
harm's
type of
way.
Haworthia, I
To
believe.
ensure that their photosynthesis keeps functioning, evolution has given them an ingenious solution. Transparent windows in their leaf tips, so that the sunshine can reach directly down into the inside of their leaves under the ground to keep the process going. Some of the most attractive succulents, at least from the human point of view, are those that have turned themselves into tiny jewels by storing water whenever there's enough around,
So there are
and
succulents that
collapsible
look like
bladder
this.
cells
That look
on
like
the
this.
outside of their
Some
leaves.
begonias, I believe, have
These
also this
expandable
ability.
cells, when they're full, store as much as half the water capacity of the actual leaf itself.
Yes, they have these bubbles on their leaves. Now this guy, he kept saying about this evolution thing. Now I don't believe in evolution. I believe in creation actually, and I don't think that anything came about by chance. I think that these plants were created with adaptations to survive these really harsh conditions. So yeah, I don't think anything would be able to survive that on their own if they're just, you know, came about by chance. So I think that they are created. Okay,
But
here I
high
think
up,
they have already traveled somewhere higher up where it's colder and the elevation is higher, and there are still succulents in this location.
it's generally wetter and cooler and suits them better in their efforts to conserve the water they've already managed to collect. They seem happy to make friends with the dampness of the moss.
So they grow alongside moss in these locations. Really nice. Wow. Oh, look at that.
There's a lot that we, as humans, can learn from the succulents. They've mastered the art of economy, especially with regard to collecting and saving water. They've learned how to endure adverse conditions, and as far as we know, stoically suffer in silence without making a fuss about it. They take advantage of whatever nature provides for them. As we saw earlier, if succulents are lucky enough to end up with their roots in channels and depressions where water is likely to collect, or where there is runoff from the surrounding rocks, they have a better chance of surviving than plants that are in the dry.
Yes. But you can see on these higher elevations,
And
there
by
are
learning
more
to live
stone
side by
plants than
side
there
with
are
their neighbors,
grassoles.
they often benefit by getting greater protection from the sun and the wind, and perhaps being less vulnerable to predators than when they're on their own.
Oh, look at that. So pretty.
Getting away
Nice
from
plants.
the desert sun for even part of the day greatly reduces the evaporation that these small plants have to endure.
And this aloe is growing right
In
under
the
its
end, the
bushes.
downside of being a plant is
Mysterious.
that you're rooted to the spot where you were born. If you're out in the sun, the best you can hope for is that some of your seeds will be carried by the wind to a place, perhaps more in the shade, where they can cope more easily with the extremes of the desert environment.
Look at that.
But plants that are out in the open have to try and provide some kind of protection for themselves.
Grassoles.
The hair that some of them develop to improve their water harvesting ability, as we saw earlier, now comes in useful as insulation that helps to protect them from the heat of the sun, and creates a layer of still air next to their skin which helps to reduce evaporation. Others produce a kind of waxy layer as their leaves dry out during the summer. This reflects away some of the sun's desiccating rays and helps to protect the new leaves hidden beneath them.
Okay, so those waxy layers, the adaptations of the plants, they have hairs, they have waxy layers on them that is farina, and the hair that is fuzzy succulents we have. And this narrator is saying that it's a type of protection so that they can also be protected from the sun. And yes, that is one adaptation of these plants. And he also said earlier that these plants will just hope that they can produce flowers, and the seeds of those will hopefully grow into more shaded areas where their offspring, where their babies, can grow much more larger. And yes, I think that's just one way that these succulents really adapt to their location, to their surroundings. So if you're seeing this on this video, if you're seeing them in really hot locations where they get a lot of sun, the plants will tend to become smaller. They don't grow very large. But those plants that are in a more shaded area, they can grow larger because they're more protected from the sun. So these succulents in the wild, in these really hot locations, they can grow bigger if they are more shaded. So I think that's what we call etiolation. And if you're actually growing your succulents in a full sun location, you will not be able to see them grow very big because it will be very hot for them, and they will not want to grow big in a place where it's very harsh. So they will still grow bigger if you have some protection for them. So that's just how succulents are in the wild. So I'm noticing here as I'm watching this one, I believe those ones that are really out in the open field, they tend to become much more smaller. So they also have a lot more dried leaves on them compared with ones that are in the shade. They can grow bigger, they can grow more clumps, and I think that their leaves can get wider in partial shade. Okay, so I think that's really nice about succulents.
The outer leaves sometimes sacrificing themselves till conditions are right for the new life to emerge in the next growing season.
Look at that, flowers.
Evolution is constantly on the move, probing and testing the boundaries, searching for better survival strategies than those currently in place. In this respect, the desert areas of southern Africa are a living laboratory where, on a miniature scale, an ongoing arms race is being played out between tiny succulent plants on the one side and the harsh climatic elements that surround them on the other.
Yes, okay. So you can also see here, there's a pattern in these succulents. And you might also have heard him say that these succulents are living in a laboratory where they always experiment on what makes them survive longer. And I think in a way it's accurate because these succulents, once they produce flowers, then they can actually cross-pollinate with a lot of their sister relatives. So if these succulents manage to grow in the wild and they're the ones that are surviving, they can cross-pollinate with one another and produce a new plant. Only the most surviving plants will be able to transfer their genes to the next generation. So that's how they are in the wild. I think it's a really nice adaptation of these plants. So I think that's about all the things that we're gonna be discussing. I think that's all about the things that I can say with this video. If you really like the clips that we showed, please make sure to hit the thumbs up and please also make sure to hit the subscribe. If you have any other videos that you want me to react to, or if you have any other concerns, you can put it in the comments and you can message me on my Facebook page. And I think that's about it for our video, guys. I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.